Part 4 of How to Get Sober and How AA and these 12-step programs oppose anyone's ability to do so. Part 4 is removing everything toxic in your life. First, you need to be able to differentiate between who and what is toxic and what isn't. And no, I don't mean this in the way that AA means you need to disassociate from your friends, your family, and your kids, and put yourself in these meetings first. AA likes to say, oh, your recovery and making meetings is more important than your kids and your family. As Jim Battle puts it, no, you can have both. How about both being important? Your parents who are telling you to get a job, to clean the house, to check in on time with them. Your children who, yes, are a lot of work and require a lot of responsibility. These are not toxic people. They're not enablers. They do not suffer from your disease as well. One of my favorite Les Brown quotes is, birds of a feather flock together. You run around with losers and you will end up a loser. Unconsciously, you will pick up their traits and their habits, and most importantly, their outlook on life. If you're constantly around cynical, negative people all the time, you will end up cynical and negative. You need to surround yourself with people who will contribute to your growth. When you surround yourself with people that can never get sober, are constantly relapsing, coming in and out of the rooms, people that just never grow up and still act like they're in high school, you will start to behave the same. These are very common characteristics and traits of these AA and NA members, and a very toxic part of their group. In these 12-step groups' over-exaggerated pursuit of happiness, they're not always teaching people how to work on bad character traits such as immaturity, laziness, and being temperamental, but more teaching them how to be happy with and accepting of these bad character traits. I think one of the biggest problems with these 12-step groups is that rather than try to get people out of the toxic environment that most people trying to get sober find themselves in, they would rather try to just make them happy in that toxic environment. This is putting a Band-Aid on a gushing wound. Rather than giving a man who is homeless the tools and direction to find a good job and eventually buy a house, they would rather only teach him how to be happy being homeless. Rather than help someone living on the street, surrounded by drugs and crime, get out of that toxic environment, they would only rather teach them how to be happy in that environment. A great example of this is all of these 12-step based halfway houses that they're opening here in my community, some just a few blocks away from schools, which the community itself is in an epidemic and is breaking its own record of overdoses and deaths each year. Yeah, I get the fact that people need a change of people, places, and things, but what sense does it make to take them from a community that's full of drugs and alcohol and place them in another community that itself is in an epidemic? On top of that, when these people fail out and they're kicked to the street because their families certainly aren't taking them back, congratulations, you've just added more people to the epidemic. When getting sober and removing everything toxic from your life, you need to clean house. There's some things that just should go without saying. The phone and number associated with your dealer and their friends needs to go. The social media accounts with your using and drinking buddies needs to go. No, I'm not saying you can't have a phone or social media accounts, but when getting sober, your dealer is losing money. No one likes to lose money. They are expecting and hoping for you to relapse. Keeping that same number they have associated with you is keeping an access point for them to continuously harass and badger you. When starting a new social media account, you need to be aware of the pages and friends you are adding. Mutual friends of your dealer are obvious people not to add. People who are constantly posting pictures of them out at the bar or of themselves high are people not to add. When it comes to certain pages you want to follow or like, there's some things you need to take into consideration. For example, let's say you love football and you want to follow things like the NFL or your favorite team. You need to keep in mind that huge sponsors of these pages are beer companies, and their advertisements will follow you onto your page. Relationships. Relationships can be one of the most toxic possible things for someone when getting sober, especially when both people are trying to get sober. The odds of being able to get sober when both suffer from a drug or alcohol problem are incredibly low. In most relationships like this, you will see this seesaw effect, where one is ready to get sober but the other isn't, and they continuously drag one another down, and this can go on for years. In a relationship like this, what you'll see is that when one is doing well and the other isn't, they start to get jealous. They feel like the other person is going to move on to bigger and better things, and that they're going to be left there in their own misery. Jealousy then turns into sabotaging the other to make sure that they're not left there alone. This is a toxic environment, and you need to get out of it. Yeah, it sucks breaking up with someone, and it's obviously harder when a marriage and kids are involved, but you will waste a lifetime thinking you aren't good enough for a relationship better than that, to think that your kids don't deserve a life better than that. Life is way too short to spend years in a relationship you aren't happy with, that makes you miserable, that only drags you down. These 12-step groups put people directly into these situations. When you start teaching people that they have a lifelong illness, that the only way to keep their illness in remission is to make weekly meetings, that requires a hovering parental figure, i.e. a sponsor, that you need to spend countless hours with each week, and all the other things that these 12-step programs instill in people to isolate them to the group only, you start to limit your choices to other members of the group only. Which is a huge reason why sex and dating within the rooms is so prominent. What are the odds that when out to meet a random girl, she say, "Oh, you have a chronic illness to drugs and alcohol? What luck, me too." My personal opinion on relationships is for the first year, don't have them. Nobody wants to be alone. It's human nature to want to be with somebody. But when you're looking for someone, when you're still trying to find yourself, when you're not happy with your life, you are drastically lowering your own standards. Once you have found yourself and you are happy and comfortable with the life you have gained from becoming sober, then you will find the right person. I want to paint you the picture of an incredibly toxic environment, especially for young women. Rooms that courts are now sentencing pedophiles, sex offenders, and other violent criminals into. Rooms where older men preying and sleeping on younger women is so prominent that the members themselves have given it a slogan and deemed it 13th stepping. That itself is so prominent that books, documentaries, movies have all been made just to show what women are facing when they walk into these rooms. And of course, I'm talking about the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous. Which, by the way, how dare courts be able to force kids into that? Getting out of this toxic, self-destructive environment is what's going to lead into the next video. And I'll see you next week.